It's been a little while since we studied the book of Zechariah, and so I will do just a moment of background for just a moment, just a brief review, literally just a moment. But we've been introduced to the historical situation where the exiles of Babylon have returned to the land, and they are in the process of rebuilding Jerusalem. They've established an altar. They're starting to rebuild the temple. There's a ragtag group of about 50,000 of them in the land of Judea trying to scratch out an existence there. And we've also been introduced so far to the prophet himself, Zechariah. We've been introduced to Joshua, or Yeshua, Jesus, the high priest, which we talked about a little bit a couple of weeks ago. We talked a little bit about escaping Babylon in a spiritual sense. And we've also learned a little bit about garments of righteousness, which I thought was fascinating. And then Mike also shared with us regarding this stone with 7 eyes and stuff like that. That was fascinating. We're kind of in chapter 4. There are some elements of that will be revisited. And so we'll kind of touch on that, but probably not this week. That'll probably be next week. I am actually hoping that as we continue in this study of chapter 4 especially, that there's a pretty big unified theme in here. And if you read chapter 4 of Zechariah, you probably noticed that there's a pretty unified theme here. And I don't know that we need to spend 3, 4, 5 weeks in chapter 4. It's fairly compact, so you'll be happy to know that we might be moving a little bit more rapidly. But I think the first part is we need to read chapter 4. So if you have it, let's rock and roll. It's story time with Uncle Alan. All right. So here is what it says. This is Zechariah chapter 4. It says, "Then the angel who was speaking with me returned and roused me as a man who is awakened from his sleep. And he said to me, 'What do you see?' And I said, 'I see, and behold, a lampstand, all of gold, with its bowl on the top of it, and its 7 lamps on it, with 7 spouts belonging to each of the lamps which are on the top of it. Also 2 olive trees by it, one on the right side of the bowl, and the other on its left side.' Then I answered and said to the angel who was speaking with me, saying, 'What are these, my Lord?' And so the angel who was speaking with me answered and said to me, 'Do you not know what these are?' And I said, 'No, my Lord.' And then he answered and said to me, 'This is the word of Yah to Zerubbabel, saying, Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, says Yah of hosts,' or Adonai Zavaot. 'What are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you will become a plain, and he will bring forth the top stone with shouts of grace, grace to it.' Also the word of Yah came to me, saying, 'The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house, and his hands will finish it. Then you will know that Yah of hosts has sent me to you. For who has despised the day of small things? But these 7 will be glad when they see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel. These are the eyes of Yah which range to and fro throughout the earth.' Then I answered and said to him, 'What are these 2 olive trees on the right of the lampstand and on its left?' And I answered the second time and said to him, 'What are the 2 olive branches which are beside the 2 golden pipes, which empty the golden oil from themselves?' So he answered me, saying, 'Do you not know what these are?' And I said, 'No, my Lord.' And then he said, 'These are the 2 anointed ones who are standing by Yah, the master of the whole earth.'" Wow, that's fantastic. So you can see that the theme, if you had to suggest a theme, anyone in-house or online, what is the unifying theme of this chapter? A unifying idea, a unifying concept? Any ideas? You're all completely baffled.
Is it
Huh?
like the return
The return, okay.
Yeah, like the two witnesses maybe, or the two.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, the two witnesses. Thank you, Tracy. Yes, what do you got?
I'm just seeing the pattern of coming out of Babylon by his spirit, so it's like
Okay.
not by might, not by power.
Yep, excellent, excellent. Anybody else? Okay. Angela, would you give the hand that to Jeremy if you Jeremy, thank you, Jeremy. Yes, you oh, light. Okay, she just wanted to say light. Yes, I think light is a definitely a good point there. I mean, the whole chapter kind of starts off with this light and comes back to the light and the lampstands and this oil coming out of these trees, and it's definitely very interesting. So I think what I would point out to you first, and you know how we'd kind of just go verse by verse. In verse 1, it talks about how the prophet was like stirred up like one out of sleep. So it seems unlikely that the prophet was actually sleeping, like he had seen. You remember that he sees 8 or 10, however you kind of divide them up, 8 to 10 visions in one night. Because every time we see a new vision, it continues with this article that connects them all. And then I saw this, and then I saw that. It's like 8 to 10 visions in one night. And so I think, do you remember, like, have you ever seen in one of the prophets that you've read where like a prophet sees something or hears something and he's just kind of startled, kind of stunned? It's kind of, I mean, actually, it's not that uncommon, right? Can you think of anyone?
Daniel.
Daniel, yes, Daniel's a good example. Anyone else? I think John in the book of Revelation also has a rather overwhelming. In fact, it says, I think in the Revelation of John, he kind of became like one who was dead, and the angel or messenger had to kind of rouse him up to give him the rest of the message. So, and you're going to see some pretty strong connections between Daniel and this book and the book of Revelation. There's so many strong connections there that it's interesting to me because whatever he's seeing, whatever he has seen before, I think the last one that he saw was the one that Mike and I were talking about a couple of weeks ago, which was stones with eyes and weird stuff. So he might have been overwhelmed by the vision. And I think that what is happening here is he's being roused, not from sleeping, but just being overwhelmed spiritually, possibly even spiritual exhaustion from having seen so many stunning things. Right behind you there, Tracy.
I was thinking, like, the way it's worded is it says, he was speaking with me, came again, and awakened me as a man that is awakened out of his sleep, not just, and he awakened me.
Right.
So in context, I'm looking at this, thinking about the spiritual awakening, like maybe he's alluding to that.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And the context of chapter 4 has a lot to do with the Spirit. In fact, I personally think it's all about the Spirit and light. And I actually called this message on my little title slide, Light and Spirit. I think those are the two really key things. Brett, would you hand that to Gracie for me?
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
I don't know if it's a suggestion or a question. It made me think of Joseph with the ladder that went up to heaven, and he saw several. Jacob, I'm sorry.
Jacob's ladder, yeah.
Yeah, and he saw the visions and stuff, or dreams, or whatever it was. That was kind of
Yeah.
earth-shaking in
That's
my
overwhelming.
opinion.
Yes, absolutely. And we see that a lot in the Bible of prophets receiving revelation that is just overwhelming. And so I think that's kind of what we're looking at here. And I would say, that kind of takes me into a couple of comments that I had about verse 2, where it's like this strange menorah or menorot gets introduced. And what's interesting is that the prophet usually sees something and then asks the messenger, "What is this?" But you notice what's different this time? The messenger says, "What do you see?" He's asking the prophet what he sees. Why do you think that might be? Because it's a little bit different this time. Think that suggests anything?
you know what he's saying.
Okay, it's good insight. I think this might relate back to chapter 3. Remember when the angel was admonishing Joshua and it was almost like coming around again? We talked about rote learning and how you kind of need to have these things told to you over and over and over. What's interesting to me is this reminded me very much of like Yeshua talking to Nicodemus and sometimes the disciples saying, do you still not get what I'm talking about? And how he said to Nicodemus, you're a teacher of Israel and you don't understand these things. It's almost like the messenger of God is actually talking to this prophet saying, explain it to me. What do you see? He's like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. He's like, are you sure? It's like, it's pretty deep. Yeah, to look, to see if he is looking with spiritual eyes. Thank you, Betsy. That's a delightful insight. Being able to see with spiritual eyes is a huge part of this whole passage, I think. And it's it just kind of, it's like it's coming around again. He's saying you should, if you're thinking in the spirit, you should start to see these things and understand these things a little bit better, because it's a mystery. I personally, whenever I look at like what Yeshua was talking about with Nicodemus, like, dude, you're talking crazy stuff, man. And I get where Nicodemus is coming from. I'm not sure I understood that at all. But I want to show you a parallel passage from Daniel at chapter 8. If you want to turn there, you can. I'm just going to show you a little passage here, which I think is interesting and kind of goes along with it, because Daniel saw something that was heavy and spiritual, and he responded in a similar way. So here's from Daniel chapter 8. I'm just showing you a couple of verses here. Verse 1, verse 15, and through 17 and 27. It says, in the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that had appeared to me previously. And then he beholds this vision. And then jumping down to verse 15, it says, while I, Daniel, was watching the vision, I sought to understand it. Now the one who appeared to be a man was standing before me, and then I heard a human voice coming from between the banks of the Ulai River, that is. It called out, Gabriel, and enabled this person to understand the vision. So he approached the place where I was standing. As he came, I felt terrified and fell flat on the ground. And then jumping forward, this angel explains the vision. And in 27, it says, I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. And then I got up and again carried out the king's business, but I was astonished at the vision, and there was no one to explain it. You find that unusual? It says that the angel Gabriel came to explain the vision to him, and at the end, he's sick and astonished and says there was no one to explain it. Who is it? It's Carla. What's up, Carla?
We can't see your screen.
Oh, good night. Sorry. You're supposed to say something, man. There it is. Are you seeing it now? Okay, sorry about that. Yes, so there's your screen. But isn't that awkward? It's a little weird that he's like, he sees something, and this is the vision of the ram and the goat and stuff like that, I believe. Is that right? Yeah, he sees the vision of the animals, coming one after another, the 4 of them, and then he's like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. And someone sends the angel Gabriel to explain this to him. The angel explains the vision between verse 18 to 26. And then he's like, I was exhausted and sick for days, but I got up and carried out the king's business. But I was astonished at the vision, and there was no one to explain it. Didn't the angel just explain it to him? What does that teach you?
He was listening.
What?
I wasn't listening.
What did you say?
He was listening.
He wasn't listening.
Someone tells you what's going on.
Well, I think what it tells me is, how many times do you read the book of Revelation, for example, or the prophecies of Daniel, or the prophecies that we're reading in the book of Zechariah? I mean, what you know English, right? Some of you even know Hebrew, and you can read it in its original language. And you know what's being described, but that doesn't help. It doesn't really help you, because I totally get where Daniel is coming from. In fact, he was overwhelmed and became sick. It seems like the import of the vision, not understanding it, but he knew it was weird and he was bad. I think he had a really bad feeling about it, but he didn't exactly know what it means. And when the guy explains it, he's like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that is super, super important for us. And I've mentioned this on multiple occasions, and I'll mention it to you again just so it sticks in your brain. I am admonishing you like the angel, coming round and round again. Just because you understand what the prophecies are saying doesn't mean that it makes any sense to you. You need to, my personal opinion is, when you're reading the prophecies of the Bible, you need to be very, very humble in attitude. And you need to say, I have no idea what this is. I have ideas, I have suspicions, but I am blind as a bat. Yah is going to open your eyes if you happen to be alive at the time that prophecies begin to be fulfilled, and you are connected with His Spirit if you have eyes to see, right? Because there's always that continuous thing that we see in the Bible where if you have resisted the word of Yah repeatedly, you can no longer see. You can no longer hear. You have a heart that is closed off. That's what happens when you have a rebellious attitude who says, I'm not really interested. If you turn your heart away from hearing the words, you lose your ability to hear them. Even when they're spoken to you plainly and right in your face, they don't make sense to you anymore. It's like scales from the eyes, like Paul had. Cindy, did you want to say something? Don't do it without a microphone. Brett, hook her up. There he is. Thank you, Jeremy.
I'm just thinking too, though, like with the Old Testament, they didn't have Yeshua, so we have a little more insight on things than they did. I think
I think
at that
that's
time, there
that's
was more
agreeable. Yeah,
mystery going on back then because there were, I mean, even when the disciples were with Yeshua, they were like they didn't understand a lot of the things, and they were, I mean, I'm sure pretty astounded by the things he was saying.
absolutely.
But you said something else, and I don't remember what I was going to say.
Okay, it'll come back to you.
It'll come back.
So I agree 100% that, if you have the Spirit, you can hear some things. But I think that the import of this whole passage is coming around to a greater outpouring of the Spirit. And there's so many deep layers to what's being talked about here. And we'll get to these, we'll build on them as we go, because at a very base layer, Yah is telling Zerubbabel, we're going to build this house right now, physically, on this location. But then there's a much, much bigger parable regarding the house and regarding the kingdom. It's going to grow quite large, where it's not about Zerubbabel at all. It's not about Babylon. It's not about Jerusalem. It's something completely different. And I think that you already know. I'm not telling you anything that you haven't heard before. But I think what's interesting is that just because we can explain what we see doesn't mean that we understand it. And that is especially true with prophecy. So if you're going to think about prophecy and talk about prophecy, be very humble. Don't be presumptuous. Say, I don't know when this is going to happen, if it will happen in my lifetime, maybe it won't. And we've talked about this before. It's like prophecy, and this is what really gets troublesome, is people think, well, I need to know the prophecies so that I can understand what's going to happen in the future. No, that's soothsaying. That's being a spiritist and a medium, trying to figure out what's going to happen in the future. That's not, I'm aware of one time in the Bible where Daniel himself said, I discerned in the prophecies that the desolation of Jerusalem was 70 years. Do you know how hard that was for him to figure out? Which prophet was Daniel reading? Jeremiah. And when you read that passage in Jeremiah, is it mysterious and hard to figure out? No, it's as plain as the nose on your face. It says the desolations of Jerusalem are 70 years. So that's fairly simple. But he didn't need I'm sure he had the Spirit. But when he read it, and it was already happening, when was it happening? In his lifetime, right now. The desolations of Jerusalem had already been completed. He became aware that the desolations of Jerusalem that were supposed to last for 70 years were completed. He didn't even know about it seemingly beforehand. So I think where we get caught up with prophecy a lot of times is we think, I need to understand this so I can see what's going to happen in the future. Now, there are certain things that you can absolutely know that are going to happen in the future. What's one of them? Jesus is coming back. You're going to be gathered. God's kingdom is going to rule on this planet. Anything else? Do you know anything else for certain? What's that?
Mark of the beast.
There's a mark of a beast, a mark of a beast, or the mark of the beast, whatever that is. You could think that that is a literal physical mark on your body. You might also think that that is a spiritual mark.
Or it could be both,
Or it could be both.
because we're spirit and we're physical.
True enough. It could be both. So what you need to do is, in my estimation, is be really, really conscientious about how you ascribe meaning to prophecies. Because what I see in the Bible is people are seeing things happening around them and saying what? Thus it was written. They're not projecting in the future, saying, oh, Yah revealed to me that this is going to happen in the future. Now, that does happen in one situation. What's the one situation where something is prophesied, you see it, the word is confirmed? What is that? That's from Deuteronomy 13, where you get to test whether a prophet is real or not, if he's speaking the words of Yah. Do you think that people who are listening to somebody talk and he's prophesying something 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years in the future, how are you going to test his word if what he's saying is not going to happen for 1,000 years? You won't know whether he's actually a true prophet until way later. That doesn't help the people listening to false prophets. Angela?
You were just saying that thing about not being able to see in the future, but realizing it as it's happening. Right. I don't know if you guys have ever like watched a movie or a TV show and then forgot that you watched it, and you come back later, and as you're watching it, it's like it dawns on you what's about to happen next, but you're not sure how it ends, but you know, oh, that person's about to do this. I get the feeling like the prophecy will be sort of like that, like in the moment, right there, what's right in front of you, that will be like, click. Now that you're familiar with it, see it, but not like,
right.
I know which country to move to avoid this or that or all that.
Absolutely. Mike, thank you.
I mean, just kind of tagging on to that, I think that sense of knowing, and it's probably similar to what's happening in Zechariah and with Daniel, is that they've seen these things already happen several times, right? It's the pattern since the beginning of fall, separation, bringing back, right? Restoration.
Yep, absolutely. Great insight. Great insight. And I think the New Testament writings give us such a great insight, because these guys in the New Testament are continuously saying, thus was fulfilled what was written in the prophet. You know, Yeshua did this, Yeshua did that, thus was fulfilled. They're seeing it right in front of them, and they're saying, oh, it makes sense now, what was written back in the prophets. So I think if you happen to be alive at the end times and things start happening, you'll be able, with the Spirit of God, to look around and go, thus it was written. I see it now. That makes sense. It is not like so that you can look into the future and know what's going to happen and know where to go and know where to hide and know. No. I personally think that is not likely to happen. Now, however, I don't want to fully say, because there will be people on this planet, I assume, when the Spirit is poured out and Yeshua is coming in his strength, that there are certain people on this planet with a special mission and a special place at a special time where a Father or the Spirit or somebody is going to tell them, hey, pack up and go over here. Am I expecting that for like everybody, the body of believers during the tribulation period? I'm not. But I don't know. Like I said, whatever you're thinking about prophecy, hold on to it with the tiny tips of your fingers. Do not grab onto it and hold on tight. You're going to be disappointed, I guarantee it. Just hold on very, very loosely. So, all of that, I apologize for waxing eloquent. Let me get to the menorah. Okay, so he is describing something here, and I believe that I put another brief description. Yes, in verse 2, he describes what he's seeing, okay? The menorah itself. Now, review Exodus 25 and 37 at your leisure regarding the menorah that was instructed by Father to give to Moses to have him build for the tabernacle, okay? It's got the center column with the branches coming off. There's 7 of them. It's got, it needs to be cleaned and wicks trimmed and tended and continuously filled with oil by whom? The priests, yes. Which priests? Any old priests? Any house of Levite guy?
Levitical high priest.
Levitical high priests only. The priests, the family of Aaron, are the only ones who are allowed to go into that holy place, right? So it's got to be them who are tending it. Now we're collecting olive oil from the family of Israel to put into that lamp. But this is a single 7-branched menorah that is inside the tabernacle. Now, review that in your own time. So that one has to be tended by man. It has to be taken care of. And the family of Aaron is the one who's going to do it. Now, this menorah that is described in this text is different. It's got some strange things going on about it. I want to read to you again Zechariah 4, 2 through 3. It says, he saw, and behold, a lampstand all of gold, with its bowl on the top of it, and its 7 lamps on it, with 7 spouts belonging to each of the lamps which are on the top of it. Also 2 olive trees by it, one on the right side of the bowl and the other on its left side. And then at the end of chapter 4, you see a little bit more. He asks for more information regarding these 2 olive trees and the 2 branches which are emptying into a golden bowl, which is the same bowl that is on top of this thing. Now, just in your mind, what are you seeing here? Would anyone care to try to verbalize what this thing looks like? Because it's got some differences from what you're seeing in the temple menorah. This took me a while to look through this and look at the Hebrew. And the Hebrew also, in the original Hebrew text, says some very strange things. You can look at this translation in 3 or 4 or 5 different translations, and you're going to see different things. I've told you before that when you see in different translations, it's translated very differently. You know that there's gold there. You should dig because there's something very mysterious going on here. Would anyone care to venture what this thing looks like in your mind's eye? There may not even be, when I first read this a couple of times, I was like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. I could not physically describe it. I had to go over it and look deeper. And I wouldn't expect you to. But does anyone want to try? Does anyone have any idea what you're looking at here? Ella, give her a microphone. Jeremy, hand it over to Steve. Steve will hand it over to Ella. Thank you, Steve. Ella, what do you think?
Well, I'm probably not as sure. I'm not super sure about this, but it kind of sounds like, you have the 7 lampstands there, and sorry, I lost
So
my
wait,
place.
no, are you saying one lampstand with 7 branches, or are you saying 7 lampstands?
No, one lampstand with 7 branches. Sorry,
Okay,
I was
okay.
trying to find the verse.
Okay.
And what I thought was interesting was verse 3, where it says, and 2 olive trees are by it, one on the right of the bowl and the other at its left. It sounds like the olive trees are supplying the oil to the lampstands, the 7 lampstands on the one lamp,
Yes.
with like a bowl
Yes.
on top. I'm not entirely sure what the bowl would look like. That part was confusing me a little, but I have a picture, of 2 olive trees supplying the oil.
Excellent. Yes, that's a good insight. Who is it? Somebody online wants to say something. It's, Mundo, go ahead, buddy. Now, I'm curious, Mundo, where are you connecting these ones who stand beside, where are you getting that these are people?
These are the 2 anointed ones. If you look at Matthew 17
Okay, so you're talking about the Mount of Transfiguration when Moses and Elijah appear to the disciples and they just say, hey, let's build some sukkahs. And then also to the book of Revelation regarding the two witnesses who are, killed in the streets of Jerusalem. Okay, so you're connecting these dots. Okay,
Because it says these are the two anointed ones.
okay. Now, are you connecting those because you see similar language? How are you connecting those two things?
When you see the anointed ones, like you see in 17:3, but then when you also go to Revelation 11:6, it talks about actually, and it's also in Revelation 11:3 through 10, and also have 1 Kings 17:1. So it talks about these two anointed ones. Whenever you see it says something about anointed ones, that's talking about people, not necessarily a plan.
Okay,
So then
okay.
that anointed one. But then when I first solidified, when I looked at Revelation 11:6, it lines up with Matthew 17:3. And those are the only times where it talks about two particular people that are considered the anointed ones. And when you look at Revelation 11:6, it talks about how they have the power to stop the rain from falling from the sky, which is what Elijah did. And it also talks about how he has the power to cause the water to turn to blood, which was Moses did. So the actions that took place between these two anointed ones that appeared to Yeshua. I mean, of course, nothing is how do you say that? Nothing is guaranteed of what I'm interpreting, but it makes sense. It all connects when you look at it that way.
Okay,
When I see the word one, it's just
yeah, and I think that that's a reasonable assumption that is very, very common. I think for a long time, people have said that those two witnesses in the book of Revelation are Moses and Elijah. And I think that there's every reason to make some type of a connection to the book of Zechariah and what we're looking at here. As to what that means exactly and how it relates to this, we're going to have to dig a little bit deeper. To someone who has the microphone, thank you, Jeremy. Would you hand that to Tracy for me? Thank you very much, Mundo. Good insight, Tracy.
Just to kind of bring out, too, the translations often say the two anointed ones, but the Hebrew says sons. So the two sons of the oil who are standing by the Lord. It's Beni. So it's actually talking about sons.
Right.
And I tend to agree. There's something about it. And it reminds me, where else do we talk about two olive trees? Well, Romans, they've got the wild olive tree, the natural olive tree.
Right.
So there's some connections I think that can be made. And then there was something else, and I think it's in Kings, the two cherubim. They were made from olive trees and covered in gold, and there were these two like witnesses kind of that are standing. So there's some connections there, I think.
Absolutely. Those are all excellent insights. And I think you're starting to see these connections. And these are people who are highly trained to listen to these words and these phrases that are appearing in their Bible. And they're saying, hey, I can connect that to this over here, and I can connect that to this over here. That's a great way to do it. It's a great insight. Cindy, you want to grab that? Or can you reach it? Okay, thanks. Go
I
ahead.
was just wondering if it's possible that those two trees also represent heaven and earth.
That's a good question because, when you look at the Deuteronomy 28, you see Moses talking about he's calling two witnesses and he's saying heaven and earth. So that's why some people have interpreted what Mundo was talking about, not as people, but as something else, something that's a little bit more inexplicable. I'm not going to purport to say to you that I know what that would what does it mean that heaven and earth are witnesses? That could mean a lot of things. That could be very interesting. You could
Well,
go.
it could be that one of the witnesses is representing heaven and one is representing earth. But
Yes, if you
like
say
like the
Moses
Old
is
Testament
yeah,
saints, like
right.
the concreteness of Israel and the walk that they had in the wilderness, and the whole Old Testament is more of a concrete
Yeah,
thing,
so
and then
you
this
might
is more of an
you
New
might break it
Testament's more
apart between
abstract.
Moses and Elijah.
Yeah,
That's one way to look at it.
yeah.
Mike, you got the okay. Who am I got here? Mundo, were you going to say something?
yes. I wanted to further clarify. So in Revelations 11:10, it does have the actual language. It says these are the two olive trees, and the two lampstands that are standing before the Elohim of the earth.
Right. Excellent. Okay, Mike.
Because of the verse that is there about not by power, not by might, but by my spirit, I think there's something being said within this chapter. You compared it back to the last chapter about, what's happening. And there were all these if statements, right? If you do this, then I'm going to do this.
Right.
And the context of chapter 3 and 4 is the building of this temple,
Yeah.
right? So ultimately, we've seen in the patterns in the past, when we're doing these things, the Spirit will dwell. When we're not, the Spirit's going to leave. I'm going to vacate. And I think these two trees are feeding this oil into this. It's a spiritual picture. It's the function of how that Spirit works.
Right.
I mean, we can hypothesize what the trees are all day. I personally think it's maybe a bigger picture of even the two branches, right?
Sure.
But the function of the oil feeding into those lamps from the tree, I think, is very important for us to understand who the trees are,
Sure.
because they're kind of pushing that fuel out, which is the function of the Spirit, right?
Right.
To shine
The
the light.
fuel, the spiritual fuel. I think that's a great way to look at it.
And if I could just, you also asked the question, what does this look like? Like
Yeah.
if you're just in, right? So the word lampstand is menorah. And then it says there's like a bowl or a globe on top.
Right.
And then the lamps are around it. So I'm almost picturing this menorah shape with a bowl on top and the lamps around that bowl.
Yep.
And it's some sort of piping from this tree
Right.
that's feeding the oil into it.
Good insight. Good insight. Tracy?
So the vision is describing this. This is the word of Yahovah to Zerubbabel. Okay,
That's
what
an interesting observation that you just made, because the prophet says, "What is this?" And he explains the vision by saying, "This is the word to the Zerubbabel."
So think about that, just, without getting too, wrapped around the axle about the vision itself. Not by might, not by power. It is by his word and by his spirit that we are able to come out of Babylon. So
Yes.
one possible interpretation for the word, the name is Zerubbabel. Zerub means to flow out or flow away from Babylon, Babel.
Yep.
So this is the word of Yahovah to flow out of Babylon, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says Yahovah of hosts. And he says, who are you, great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you shall become a plain. And that great mountain you can cross-reference to Babylon.
Yep.
And Jeremiah 51, 24 through 26 I have here. I haven't looked it up recently, but I think that's the one. So
That's an excellent insight.
Yeah.
Excellent insight. And I think that we lose sight of that when we read this passage, and we get wrapped around the axle on the mystery and the menorah and the branches, and we're like, oh, this is something, and I'm not saying that that's not a realistic connection to make with Moses and Elijah and going to the book of Revelation. That's fine. But what you got to remember is that when he asks him, what is this? The messenger says, this is the word to Zerubbabel.
yeah.
Not by might, not by power, but by my spirit. And this is going to enable him. And you've seen other language where mountains getting leveled. This reminded me very much of Yeshua saying, if you had just a little bit of faith, you could throw this mountain into the sea. And we know that mountains symbolize what often in the Bible? Kingdoms, even great rulers. So this is some type of opposition that's happening. And it's happening literally in the life of Zerubbabel and of Joshua and in the life of the prophet, right there in his day and time. Now, that's not all, though, obviously, because we keep seeing this happen over and over and over. It's like this message, this prophecy, this vision has real and important considerations for those people at this time, right now, that we're reading about. But it also it just keeps blossoming and growing into something else. And I think that the vision of the menorah and what it symbolizes and what it represents in the beginning, when it first is given to Moses for the tabernacle, can give you some insight and some wisdom regarding how the Spirit, I think you can very much, many of you have already kind of determined in your mind and from your years of study, that the menorah in the tabernacle is about the Spirit. The oil, you talk about the 10 virgins who have oil for their lamps and those who don't. you know that there's a connection to the Spirit, okay? So we have to determine, seems to be saying that my spirit is going to accomplish my will in regards to my kingdom. It's not going to be dependent upon you. You don't have to, I don't need your help. It's not by your physical strength. It's not by your army. It's not by your horses and chariots, your Iron Dome missile system, the help of the United States. I don't need any of that. Okay, I've got this under control by my spirit. That's just extrapolating that meaning out way beyond thousands of years later. Okay, Tracy, do you want to say something?
I was just going to say, in addition to that, I think he's saying not by, this is the word of Yahovah to Zerubbabel, not by might, not by power, I think is illustrating you can't receive this word of Yahovah by your own might or power,
Yes.
but by his spirit
Right.
only. And that's the only way you're going to truly see and understand and come out of
Absolutely.
Babylon. Because
Absolutely.
lots of people try to read this word and see it through the flesh, and that's not going to work.
That
Yeah,
was the whole problem in Egypt when they were in the wilderness. That was the whole problem with the Israelites.
yeah, just seeing
in
things.
the wilderness is they did not. They had the same. So it says they had the same gospel in Hebrews 4, right? But it wasn't mixed with faith.
It didn't mix with
It's-
faith, and it was
that's
no
been the
profitable to
problem
it.
all
Yeah,
along.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Mundo.
Here and there. And then- and then you can go to that.
Do you think that's Babylon he's referring to? And the reason why I came to that conclusion is because at the end of verse 7 it says favor, favor for it. Well, that's what I have. Where you have grace on yours, right?
Yeah, well, hen, Hebrew hen, I assume is what it is.
Do you think this has to do with Cyrus? Because remember, Cyrus gave them the authority to go ahead and rebuild the temple. Do you think this has anything to do with that, being that I was saying the great mountain gave it the kingdom of Babylon gave favor to them to rebuild and gave the orders to Zerubbabel to rebuild the temple?
You know, that's a great question, and it's difficult for me to ascertain precisely what the obstacle was that was around in the historical context of this book, because, as you just mentioned, Cyrus had already issued his decree. That was 150 years prior to the portion that we're reading here. Okay, so Cyrus makes this original decree. He dies and is replaced by Darius, and there's the halt. There's a big halt that happens. If you remember when we first started reading this book, at the beginning we did a historical background. Cyrus issued the decree to let the Jews go back from Babylon 125 or 135 years before the time that we're reading about. There was a big pause of like nothing happening. And then Darius actually said, go and get back there. And he issued a second decree. So quite a bit of time has already passed. So looking at the historical context of this book, it's hard for me to determine what exactly is the obstacle that Zerubbabel is dealing with. You might look at the books of Nehemiah and Ezra, which talk about these Sanballat and some of these others who are coming against the Jews, trying to rebuild their temple and saying, hey, we want to get involved in the temple. And they're like, no, you have no part in this. This has nothing to do with you. And those are the guys who turned them in and said, hey, these Jews are trying to cause trouble. They got no business being over there. And they had to pause building of the temple in order to get approval again, because they had seemingly forgotten. Oh gosh, we got to go back into the archives and see, did Darius actually decree this? Oh yeah, he did. Okay, go ahead and start. So yeah, we got some, that I think might have something to do with it, but it's hard for me to say it's a ruler of the Persians, for example, because they did not seem to be an obstacle in the way. They seemed to be paving the way to make it happen. They called Cyrus the anointed one. So he's helping.
Right, so it could have been Sanballat then.
I kind of, that's my gut feeling at this time, is that Sanballat and some of those people that you read about in Nehemiah and Ezra is probably more likely the obstacle that they're dealing with in the days of Zerubbabel and Joshua and Zechariah and Malachi. Who is it? It's Heather. Heather, what do you got, sister?
Hey there, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Cool, it works. All right. So I was just curious. I really haven't studied this a whole lot, but I've heard that in this context that Zerubbabel, who was the governor at the time, and Joshua the high priest were the two trees that we were talking about. So I just want to get your thoughts on it. They were saying that they were, it says in Zechariah 3:8 that they were signs, right?
Yeah.
And they represent the offices of, king and high priest. And then that later gets filled by Yeshua because he's both king and high priest.
Yeah, and
He's providing the oil.
I think that's a great insight, Heather. In fact, I think it's quite interesting when you think about the two offices that are discussed here. And later on in the book of Zechariah, you will see that those two things are merged into one. That hasn't come up yet, but it's coming. That suddenly you see a merging of king and priest together in the book of Zechariah. Now, if you've got a king and a priest, well, that's in a figurative, metaphorical way, that's also like heaven and earth, isn't it? A priest has a connection from above to below. And a king, that's like a connector. It's that connecting. I mean, Levi means connector, doesn't it? That's why my husband will be connected to me now. That's why she named the kid Levi. So this heaven and earth is connected by that tribe. But what's interesting is you could interpret it that way. A kingdom that is ruled by a ruler of Jerusalem. Zerubbabel is a governor. Not a king, but he's a governor. And then you got the high priest. So that could also be seen as heaven and earth. Tracy, do you have the microphone?
Yeah, so that made me think of the possibility of what we were saying before. These are the two sons. So we got the word sons here.
Yeah, the word ben is there.
And we know Messiah is the son, but he's called Messiah ben Yosef and Messiah ben David.
Right.
So it's the two sons,
Right.
but in one. So that is a possibility, I think.
Good possibility, absolutely. I think absolutely it is. Now, I would point out to you a couple of interesting things, and I want to show you a visual here in just a second. Remember the original menorah having to be tended by the priesthood. And you can remember what you read in the book of Hebrews. We've talked about Hebrews a couple of times in this study where it's talking about how these high priests have to offer something for themselves, and they continually are dying, and a new one has to come around. This is a priesthood that has some trouble and has had for a long time, okay? But then you look at this vision, and you're starting to see, I think, Ella, being an artist and having a little bit of a visionary sense of what art looks like, thought to herself, well, this seems to be like some kind of perpetual motion machine, where I thought about a cat with a peanut butter sandwich strapped to his back, and you just throw it out there and it just kind of turns in space. I totally screwed up my metaphor the other day, and my wife was like, a peanut butter sandwich? What are you talking? Like, are you talking about like buttered toast strapped to the cat's back? Have you guys heard that before?
Yeah.
It's like when, a cat always lands on its feet and toast always lands butter side down. So if you strap it to the cat, it just spins in space. I said, you strap a peanut butter sandwich to the cat. And she's like, what are you talking about? Anyway, no, what you've got here, this vision seems to be what Ella was picking up on, is like some kind of a bowl that's collecting oil from these two olive trees that are like putting out olive oil right into this bowl, and then this bowl is feeding this menorah. So you guys kind of start to get a picture of this, and I found a couple of images which I thought were fascinating, and I want to share those with you, and you kind of tell me what you think. This one is kind of interesting. You can see two olive trees, one on the left and one on the right, with these golden, like string-looking things. Those are like the two little pipes that are feeding into this bowl, which is then feeding into this 7-branch menorah. And it's almost like nobody needs to tend this thing. Not by might, not by strength. There's no priesthood involved here. This is a self-perpetuating thing. The light never goes out. The oil is continuously feeding into the bowl, which is continuously feeding by 7 pipes into the menorah. It never goes out. God's Spirit is causing this thing to run all the time. Now, here's something that's interesting. When you read deeply into the Hebrew, you're going to find something quite fascinating. The Hebrew is strongly suggesting that there are not 7 pipes. There are 49 pipes. And that confuses people. Because they're like, why would you need 49 pipes? And that some people suggested, well, maybe there's 7 pipes going to each branch of the menorah. But why would you need 7 pipes going to each branch of the menorah? So I kept digging and digging and digging and looking, and I found something fascinating. And here it is. Notice that there is not one menorah, there are 7 menorahs. That is more likely what the Hebrew says. Now, there is one caveat here. See, you're seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 menorahs with 7 pipes coming out of the bowl with the olive tree being fed into those bowls. Does that remind you of anything?
The churches.
Yes, it's Yeshua standing in the middle of 7 menorahs in the beginning of the book of Revelation. I was like, wait a minute. The prophet is not seeing one bowl feeding in by 49 pipes into one menorah. He's likely seeing one bowl feeding out to 7 different menorahs. And then you get to the book of Revelation and it's like, whoa, okay, I'm starting to see some interesting things here. In fact, I will share that with
So
you.
you
Look,
have 7 menorahs, and then
that's 7 times 7 pipes is 49 pipes.
it makes me think of counting the Omer.
It is exactly like
That's what
counting
I'm
the
realizing.
Omer. It's exactly like counting the Yovel cycle. It's quite fascinating. Now, here's what it says in the book of Revelation, chapter 1, verse 10. He says, I was in the Spirit on the day of Yah. Now, you guys think, I don't know how many of you guys have seen that. You probably have. It says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. People think, okay, I'm tripping on Sunday. That is not what it says. It says, I was in the Spirit on the day of Yah. Have you ever heard of the day of Yah? That's the most prophetic day that is mentioned throughout every single one of the prophets. He's not kicking it on Sunday. He is in the Spirit on the day of Yah. And he heard behind him a loud voice like a trumpet. Is that also ringing some bells? The day of Yom Teruah. And he's saying, and he hears this voice saying, write in a book what you see and send it to the 7 assemblies. To Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. I turned to see whose voice was speaking to me, and when I did so, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the midst of the lampstands was one like a son of man. And then here, and later on in Revelation 1 and 20, it's the Yeshua actually revealing to him the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw, because we didn't get that part of the vision. In my right hand and the 7 golden lampstands is this. The 7 stars are the messengers of the 7 assemblies, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 assemblies. Now, what do we do with this information? That's a good question. I'm glad I asked it. I don't know the answer. I wish I did. But here's what I would say is, Mike, you know?
Well,
Give him a microphone. I want to hear this.
I think Keith and I have talked about this a little bit, and hypothesizing, is there a element of time? Remember your son years ago when we were counting 50s was like, well, 6,000, which is about the time we're in, 50 Jubilees is 120. And now we're talking about the Spirit. And what does Genesis say in the time of Noah? My spirit will not contend but 120 years. Yeah. So is there a component of time and the length of time in which this Spirit-filled bowl is going to continue to be fed?
That's a fascinating insight. Tracy? Great insight.
This is exciting. I'm
like seeing, exciting.
Yeah, I'm seeing like new things here.
It's interesting.
Well, first of all, in the Hebrew, it says menorot, like you said, it's plural, so that is plausible.
That puzzles me because the prophet says he seems to see one. Yeah. But I think he's seeing the whole contraption as one thing. It's not saying that there's one menorah. It says the whole contraption is one thing.
And it's female, so that also goes along with the church.
The idea of the Spirit and the church, yes.
And then the golden bowl thing, this is all kind of connecting it. If you want to pull up that picture again.
Oh, yeah.
I was cross-referencing Ecclesiastes 12:6, but I'll start at the beginning because it starts by saying, remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, Before the evil days come and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened and the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the guards of the house tremble. It sounds like the day of the Lord.
Right.
And then it goes down to verse 6 and says, remember him before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the jar shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to Yahovah who gave it.
Absolutely.
There's got to be a connection
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. I absolutely think so. That's a great insight. So now we have introduced a lot of elements here. Okay, we still have a lot more to go. We have introduced some elements that bear thinking about. Okay, now I want to introduce an additional element, but I first want to say, that we go, again, we're going back and forth about, don't you understand what these are? Again, he's like, you got to use your spiritual eyes. You got to use your spiritual eyes to understand what you're seeing here. So I think that twice that this happens, this back and forth between the angel and the prophet saying, do you not understand? So reminds me of Yeshua talking deep things that people who are hearing should have understood, but they didn't. I think that he's being admonished, and we need to consider that as we are considering this. We need to consider, do you not understand what you're seeing? No, my Lord, I don't. Not yet. Would you, by your Spirit, help me to understand this? What does it mean to me? Is it going to help me to understand the future? No, it's going to help you to understand the power that you have and need if you're going to do, in the moment, not in the future, in the moment. Because we have talked about this before, and I want to introduce you just a couple of things, okay? Number one, I want to reread for you this little segment right here. Okay, Zechariah 6. He answers his question, but he doesn't seem to. And you have seen that before probably in the scriptures where a prophet asks the question, I don't understand, my Lord, and he says this. You're like, well, that doesn't answer my question. No, it does. You just can't understand it. So this is the answer. The vision, is the word of Yah to Zerubbabel, saying, not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, says Yah of hosts. What are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel you will become a plain, and he will bring forth the top stone with shouts of grace, grace to it. The top stone is the cornerstone. I think that, are you seeing that? I'm not way out in left field here. The cornerstone, the stone with 7 eyes that we saw in chapter 3. So I think we need to remind ourselves that we need the Spirit of Yah in order to help us to see clearly what this vision is. And I think we can bring in a couple of additional things which will help us. Okay, number one, we need to just be patient. We need to say, I don't know. The time is not right. Remember, Daniel was told to seal up the vision. There's a reason. It wasn't practical for him. Why wouldn't he just give it to him? Say, here you go. It's not for you, but I'll give it to you.
Because the meaning's in the waiting. That's why.
The meaning is in the waiting. That's part of it. Do you think that having that knowledge beforehand was going to help Daniel in some way? No, I don't think it would have. I think it would have weighed down his spirit. I personally think, I have thought this for decades, and I have no idea why. I think that Daniel's spirit saw what was to become of the family of God, and it sickened him and destroyed his spirit, and he was greatly disturbed. Because he was seeing through the millennia, and he saw what would become of the family of God. I don't know where I got that idea. I have had that since I was young. When I would read these passages, I think that Daniel was given a vision of the church, and what he saw terrified him. Am I coming out of left field here? No. Are you
seeing what's happening with all these nations overtaking God's people? So,
right.
I mean, I don't think that's a stretch.
Yeah, and I think absolutely. But for whatever reason, some of the language in there just struck me that he was seeing the church. He was seeing the assembly of God and thinking, what happened? What has happened? That's frightening. Jeremy, grab that microphone right here behind Tracy and pass it over to Ella. Thank you, sir.
So are you thinking that, if I'm following anyway, are you thinking that there are 7 menorahs and each menorah has 7 lampstands on it? And are you saying that each menorah is one of the churches?
Well, that's what Yeshua seems to be telling John, but I wonder about that because I look at the fact that all of those churches, you know where they are? They're all in modern Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I thought to myself, okay, that's interesting. I don't know exactly what to make of that. Somehow it occurred to me to think that I thought to myself, well, you know, maybe that's just a visual representation of the message being spread across the kingdom. Okay, so that's possible. Angela has a comment behind you when you're done. But it also occurred to me that maybe that should be expanded. I mean, how many continents are there on the planet? There's 7. But maybe that's a visual representation of the church expanding. I'm not sure.
And I had this thought, and it kind of made sense in my brain, but who knows? Kind of adding to what my dad said. I don't know if that was last week or when he did his presentation. So if there's 7 menorahs and each one is one of the churches, and each lampstand, as my dad was saying, could be one of the 7 spirits. So each church has the 7 spirits within them. So I just thought that was
Yeah, the
kind of
spirits
interesting.
yes, that's an excellent insight. Angela? And now I'm coming back to you, Mundo, in a second.
A couple years ago, we were looking at that, the 7 churches, and we looked at them on the map, and the layout of them was strikingly similar to the layout of the visible stars on the Pleiades constellation. And we kind of did a little dive into that while there's 7 to 9 visible stars in the Pleiades, there, if you avert your gaze and look at it, there's a cloud because there's a multitude of stars clustered right there. And so we were thinking that while you had 7 churches in Revelation, they were representative of a bigger multitude or cloud of,
A cloud of witnesses.
yes, and that those are riding on the shoulder of the bull. And we kind of went into their placement and what that meant to be on the shoulder of the bull, and that was your safe
Absolutely.
gathering place.
Good insight. Good insight. Mundo, take it away, brother. That was Mike.
I believe this scripture ties into that teaching, and I'm wondering if verse 10 is defining verse 3. No, I'm sorry, verse 2. Because when you jump down to verse 10 at the last sentence, it says, "These 7 are the eyes of Jehovah.
Yes.
Which diligently search throughout the earth, all the earth."
Yep.
So could those 7 lampstands be the 7 eyes of Jehovah as described in chapter 3, verse 9?
Yep. Yep, absolutely. I personally think so. And I think that when I read that, I was, absolutely going back to the previous chapter where it's talking about the stone with 7 eyes and everything. Yes, I think they're very much connected to what Mike was talking about last time. Very much so. Good question. Good question. So I want to just share with you briefly. I just wanted you to see Mike. I was going to share with you briefly a couple of brief passages and then we'll wrap up. I know it's getting, you know what? It's not quite as late for you guys in Minnesota right now. You jumped forward a little bit, didn't you? Oh, I get to keep you up for another hour, Steve. I'm just kidding. But I wanted to share something with you here. This is a parallel passage from Haggai. And I strongly recommend, and I have before, that you think about reading Haggai together with Zechariah. They're contemporaneous prophets. They're alive at the same time talking about the same things. And this can give us some good insight. So here's what happens in chapter 2 of Haggai. And I would say, let's connect these things here. Here's what it says. On the 21st day of the 7th month. What is that?
Sukkot.
That is dab smack in the middle of Sukkot, possibly the great 8th day of Sukkot. On the 21st of the month, if you got Yom Teruah on the 1st, and
That's the first day of Sukkot.
yeah, so that's the first day of Sukkot, and then you got Yom Kippur on the 10th day of Sukkot. 7 days later, that's, yeah, you're getting real close to right smack in the middle of Sukkot.
My apologies. That's the day before Sukkot starts. Sukkot starts on the 22nd.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So on the 21st day of the 7th month, Yah's message came through the prophet Haggai again and said, ask the following questions to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, the governor of Judah, the high priest Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, and the remnant of the people. Who among you survivors saw the former splendor of this temple? How does it look to you now? Isn't it nothing by comparison? Even so, take heart, Zerubbabel, decrees Yah. Take heart, Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and take heart, all you citizens of the land, decrees Yah, and begin to work. For I am with you, decrees Yah of heaven's armies. Do not fear, because I made a promise to your ancestors when they left Egypt, and my spirit even now testifies to you. Moreover, this is what Yah of heaven's armies has said. In just a little while, I will once again shake the sky and the earth, the sea and the dry ground. I will also shake up all the nations, and they will offer their treasures. Then I will fill this temple with glory. So Yah of heaven's armies has said, the silver and gold will be mine, decrees Yah of heaven's armies. The future splendor of this temple will be greater than that of former times, Yah of heaven's armies has declared. And in this place I will give peace, decrees Yah of heaven's armies. And then jumping forward a little bit to verse 21, it says, tell Zerubbabel, the governor of Judah, I am ready to shake the sky and the earth. Sound like a mountain being knocked down? Heaven and earth. There's heaven and earth again. I will overthrow royal thrones and shatter the might of earthly kingdoms. I will overthrow chariots and those who ride them, and horses and their riders will fall as people kill one another. On that day, there's the day of the Lord, it says Yah of heaven's armies, I will take you, Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, my servant, says Yah, and I will make you like a signet ring, for I have chosen you, says Yah of heaven's armies. That's a fascinating passage. And there's another passage right in the middle of that chapter about whether you're taking holy things into your garment, does it become polluted and stuff? Fascinating discussion. But I would say, what's the connection here? Yah himself is going to accomplish this thing. Angela, you got the microphone? Who's got it? Gracie's got it for you. Yeah, what do you got?
Did you say he was talking about taking polluted things into your garments?
Yes, he did.
Because that 21st day is the last day of Sukkot. And Sukkot is tabernacles, the thing you're in, your garment.
Yeah, that's true in a sense. Yeah, the flesh tabernacle, that's actually true. It's a good way to look at it. Yeah, that's quite fascinating. Yeah. Right. And which is interesting because we've been, the wedding garments, we've been talking about these garments of righteousness. But yeah, it all ties together quite nicely. But then take a look at this. His power, and this is the whole point of this, I think. His power is going to accomplish the great work. We're talking about a great work being done here. A great work. And his power is going to accomplish it, not yours, okay? It is not up to you. It is not up to his people to accomplish this. However, his people have an important part to play. I think that's the point that needs to be made here. You have an important part to play, but it is not up to you. Because I think we have to find that balance. I think that especially in this Hebrew roots or Messianic Judaism or whatever the heck we are in this fellowship, a lot of weight is placed upon performance. And believe me, I'm all thinking, yes, we should perform God's will to the greatest extent that we possibly can. But it is not by your might, it is not by your power that any of this is going to be accomplished. You can do you can do nothing to accomplish what is going to be accomplished. However, you can disqualify yourself from being involved. Okay? here's the point that I guess I would make, and I'll wrap up with this. You have read before about how the new covenant, the renewed covenant, however you want to say it, was prophesied. Where was that prophecy? Everyone knows the one. Where is it? Jeremiah 31 and 31. Jeremiah 31, 31. Now, someone, I believe it was Mundo, just pointed out that it's actually duplicated in Ezekiel 36. But most people don't really talk about that one very much. And I think that we should read that because there's something quite fascinating in here, which is slightly different than Jeremiah 31. And it has specifically to do with what we've been reading about. Take a look at this. In Ezekiel 36 and 24, it says this. Here's your rapture. I will take you from the nations and gather you from all the countries. Then I will bring you to your own land. I will sprinkle you with pure water, and you will be clean from all your impurities. I will purify you from all your idols. I will give you a new heart, and I will put a new spirit within you. I will remove the heart of stone from your body and give you a heart of flesh. And then I will put my spirit within you. I will take the initiative, and you will obey my statutes and carefully observe my regulations. Then you will live in the land I gave to your fathers. You will be my people, and I will be your God. That's what that spirit is doing. He is. What's fascinating, and what is the part that is actually missing from Jeremiah? Maybe it's in Jeremiah, but it's kind of hidden, and it's not real apparent, but it's real apparent here. Okay, yes, that's a good one. Notice it says in verse 27, I will take the initiative, and you will obey. He is going to give you the Spirit which will enable you to obey. I personally think that if you have the Spirit in you right now, it's very little. It's just not been poured out yet. I know that you have the Spirit of God in you or you wouldn't be alive, right? You got to have the Spirit of God in you or you wouldn't have breath in your body. But then you are granted a little more, according to Jeremiah 31, 31, which is, I will grant you my Spirit and I will help you to walk in my ways. This passage seems to suggest something a little more powerful. You can very much read Ezekiel 36 and Jeremiah 31, 31 and go, gosh, I don't know if the New Testament has actually fully been fulfilled yet. I'm sure you have already thought of that many times, and you are correct. Just because Jesus, Yeshua, showed up 2,000 years ago does not mean the program is done. It's only halfway done. Because all of the prophecies about his return in the kingdom of God and all of these things that we've been reading about haven't happened yet. And I personally believe that you're going to be again having that Joel chapter 2 fulfilled again when your young men are seeing visions and your old men dreaming dreams and his Spirit will be poured out on all flesh. That's what this is talking about. Because you've got, what did Paul say? You've got a down payment. Remember when Paul said he's given you of his Spirit and it's a down payment. You're not filled with Yah's Spirit yet. You have a down payment. He's saying it's a powerful down payment. You can use it, but if you don't use it, you lose it. You can very much lose it. You can shun it. Quenching the Spirit. Remember Paul talks about quenching the Spirit? How do you quench something? It's like snuffing out a candle. You can pinch it out. You can dunk it in water. It's out. You can snuff the Holy Spirit in your life by turning your heart away and not listening. And then what happens? Can't hear anymore. You lost the ability to see and hear, and your heart has become stone again. That's why in Hebrews it says, man, those guys who turn away and then try to come, it's like it would have been better for them if they had never even started. It's like a dog returning to its vomit. This is what it's like. Gracie, you have the final word, and then I'm going to put these people to bed.
It's nothing major wild. Just that scripture right there. Lately, I've had a lot of struggles of, Lord, am I going to be able to hold on till you come? Well, thank you for holding on to me. you know. But that just sounds like it's really reinforcing that.
Yes.
When it comes to time, if I'm walking with him today, I get up in the morning and I've walked with him that day, and when the real garbage hits the fan, he'll hold me, and I don't have to worry about,
Absolutely.
am I going to make it?
No, you don't at all have to worry about what you're going to make it. And I would say this more than anything, two things. Number one, remember two things. There's a passage in the prophets which I am thinking about, and I can't remember, I think it's in Isaiah, where it says that his righteous ones are removed from the earth. That the righteous disappear and nobody pays attention. It's not about them disappearing, they're dying. Okay? You might die before Yeshua returns, and that would be a blessing. That would be a blessing. I know that you're like, I'd rather just stay here and just rapture me off the planet. Understood. But it might be a blessing to not have to go through it. If it's bad, everybody knows it's bad. You read it and you're like, gee, I don't know if I want to be a part of that. You know what? I think we've given short shrift to the idea that the righteous are pulled from the earth. In the prophecies of Isaiah talk about that, and no one pays attention. I'm wondering if maybe that's a tremendous blessing. To die before any of this crap happens. I don't know. Here's the second part of that. Remember that when the children of Israel left Egypt, no one was feeble. No one was feeble. Does that mean the feeble all died? Or because there was miraculous healing? Because people who were crippled could actually walk for miles and miles and miles, and they didn't get tired. Their clothes didn't wear out. Their shoes didn't wear out. There was miracles and supernatural things happening all the time when the children of Israel left Egypt. And remember, there are precisely the same number of plagues in Egypt as there are plagues in the book of Revelation. It's not coincidence for a reason. Remember how many of those plagues affected the children of Israel? Out of 10. How many did they have to deal with? Three. The first 3 plagues affected everybody. But then after the 3rd plague, Yah said, I make a distinction between my people and the Egyptians. None of the remaining 7 plagues had anything to do with the children of Israel. Didn't affect them. They lived through it. They saw some of it, but it didn't affect them. So I would say either way, if you die before Yeshua returns, no big deal. If you're alive when Yeshua returns, do you have to worry about being feeble and old and, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it? No, I don't think so. He'll give you wheels. Spiritual wheels that have eyes on them and turn every which way. I'm just kidding. I'm totally making that up. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a fascinating discussion.